Pay the family childcare stipend. My sister snapped, sending an invoice for $1, 200, 3 afternoons she covered. Then she filed in small claims. I printed daycare sign-in sheets, camera logs, and every Venmo. In court, she smiled. Verbal contract. The commissioner flipped to one timestamp and raised an eyebrow. Her smile cracked. Outside, my phone buzzed with a message from her ex, the one witness she forgot about. My life, up until that point, was a carefully constructed Jenga tower of schedules and responsibilities. I'm Violet. My husband Tom and I have 2 beautiful, chaotic children. Leo, who is 6 and obsessed with dinosaurs, and Maya, who is 4 and believes her life's purpose is to cover every surface of our home in glitter. We live in a modest suburban house with a mortgage that feels like a third child. We're not wealthy, not by a long shot, but we're comfortable. We're the kind of family that budgets for vacations and celebrates when we find a good coupon for the grocery store. My job in marketing is demanding. Tom's in IT is equally so. And our lives are a constant, frantic ballet of school drop-offs, deadlines, meal prep, and trying to find 5 minutes to sit on the couch together before one of us falls asleep. My sister, Daisy, was always the free spirit to my structured planner. 2 years older, she was the one who'd backpacked through Europe while I was saving for a down payment. She was the one with a string of artistic boyfriends, a wardrobe that looked like a curated vintage shop, and a perpetually uncertain financial situation. Our parents called her creative. I called her unpredictable, but she was my sister, my only sister. Our relationship was built on a foundation of unspoken reciprocity. It was the currency of family. When she and her then boyfriend, a musician I privately nicknamed Gatsby for his penchant for dramatic pronouncements, went to a music festival for a week, I watched her hyperactive beagle, Apollo. I didn't send her a bill for dog walking and poop scooping. When my car was in the shop, she'd give me a ride to work. When I was stuck in traffic and late for daycare pickup, she was my first call. She'd swoop in, charm the teachers, and have the kids happily eating ice cream by the time I arrived, flustered and apologetic. We'd hug. I'd thank her profusely, and the favor would be logged in the silent familial ledger to be repaid in kind at a later date. Money never, ever entered the equation. It would have felt tacky, profane even. It wasn't a business. It was sisterhood. Recently, though, the cracks in Daisy's bohemian facade had started to show. She'd lost her part-time job at an art gallery a few months back. Downsizing, she'd said, though I suspected it had more to do with her chronic lateness. She'd started making comments laced with a bitterness I hadn't heard before. Must be nice to have a steady paycheck, she'd say, eyeing my new on-sale coat. You and Tom are so lucky you can just buy things. The subtext was always there. You have it easy. I don't. I tried to be supportive, offering to look over her resume, sending her job postings. She'd always brush them off. I'm not a corporate drone, Vi, she'd scoff. The crisis struck as they always do on a Tuesday. Tom and I had been selected for a mandatory career-making certification course at our respective companies. It was a huge deal for both of us, a stepping stone to promotions we desperately needed if we ever wanted to upgrade. From budgeting for vacation to actually taking one without eating ramen for a month beforehand. The problem? It was 3 consecutive afternoons the following week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. The exact window of time after daycare let out and before we got home from work. As if on cue, an email landed in my inbox from the kids, daycare that same afternoon. The subject line read, Urgent, Staff Development and Early Closure. My heart sank. Due to a last-minute scheduling change, they would be closing at 2:30 p.m. on, you guessed it, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of the following week. Panic set in. A cold, prickly wave of it. We didn't have a regular nanny. Our go-to neighborhood teenager was away at college. Tom's parents lived in another state, and my own were on a cruise. A fact Daisy had lamented loudly, as they hadn't offered to pay for her to join them. What are we going to do? I asked Tom that night, pacing the kitchen. We can't miss this. We literally can't. I know, he said, running a hand through his hair. There has to be someone. What about Daisy? Of course. Daisy, my sister. The one person I could always count on in a pinch. Relief washed over me so intensely, it almost made me dizzy. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number, my mind already racing with ways to thank her. She picked up on the third ring, sounding cheerful. Hey, Vi, what's up? Hey, oh my God, you are not going to believe the scheduling nightmare I'm in. I quickly explained the situation, the can't-miss course, the daycare's sudden early closure. I'm in a total bind. I know it's a huge ask, but is there any chance you could help us out? Just for a few hours on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoon next week? Just pick them up from daycare and hang out with them at our place until I get home around 6? I held my breath. I could hear her tapping on a keyboard in the background. Next week, she mused. Monday, Wednesday, Friday afternoon. You know, I was supposed to be working on a freelance project, but for you, of course. Oh, Daisy, thank you. You're a lifesaver, I swear. I gushed, the knot in my stomach finally dissolving. We owe you big time. I'll treat you to that amazing new Thai place you love. Or I can get you a gift certificate for a massage at that spa you're always talking about. Whatever you want, seriously. Her laugh came through the phone, light and airy. Oh, stop it, don't be silly. We're family. That's what sisters are for. Happy to help, honestly. It'll be fun to hang with my favorite niece and nephew. We chatted for a few more minutes, confirming the daycare address and the code to our garage. I hung up the phone and leaned against the counter, my heart swelling with gratitude. She said yes. I told Tom, a wide smile spreading across my face. She was so sweet about it, didn't even hesitate. That's great, he said, kissing my forehead. She's a good sister. Yes, she was. I went to bed that night feeling secure in that knowledge. My sister, the one I could always count on. The silent, familial ledger was in balance. I had a problem, she had the solution, and our bond was the bridge that connected the two. I had no idea the bridge was about to be burned to the ground, and she was the one holding the match. The 3 afternoons went by without a hitch. Or so I thought. Each day, I'd get a picture from Daisy, Leo showing off a tower of blocks, Maya wearing a colander as a hat. I'd text back heart emojis and a flurry of, "Thank you again. You're the best." Her replies were short, usually just a NP or a thumbs up emoji. I chalked it up to her being busy with the kids. On Friday evening, when I got home, the house was tidy and the kids were happy. Daisy was gathering her things to leave. "I can't thank you enough, Daisy," I said, giving her a hug. "Seriously, you saved our skins this week. Let's do that dinner next week, my treat." "Yeah, we'll see," she said, pulling away a little too quickly. "I'm pretty swamped. Just text me." Her tone was flat, distant. It was the first little prickle of unease. A tiny red flag. My gratitude-soaked brain refused to properly register. I just assumed she was tired. Watching 2 young kids, even for a few hours, is exhausting. The following week was a blur of catching up at work. I sent Daisy a text on Tuesday about dinner plans, but she didn't reply. I figured I'd give her some space and try again in a few days. Then came Thursday. I was at my desk, trying to finalize a report, when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Venmo. I smiled, assuming it was my friend paying me back for concert tickets. But the name on the screen was Daisy's, with a request for $1,200 for a family childcare stipend. I actually laughed out loud. A short, sharp bark of disbelief. A joke. It had to be a joke. Daisy had a weird sense of humor. Maybe this was her way of ribbing me for being a corporate drone. I swiped over to my text messages to see the punchline. There was no punchline. Instead, there was an image file. I tapped on it, and my screen filled with a makeshift invoice created in some basic word processing program. It had a clip art logo of a smiling cartoon sun at the top. The document, titled Invoice for Family Childcare Services, was addressed to me and Tom from a provider called Daisy Miller Creative Solutions. It detailed the services rendered, claiming 4 hours of childcare from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It calculated a total of 12 hours and applied a preferred family rate of $100 per hour, bringing the total amount due to $1,200. Below the invoice was a single chilling text message from her that read, "Pay the family childcare stipend." The blood drained from my face. My hands started to shake. This wasn't a joke. The cold, impersonal language, the absurd hourly rate, a rate higher than any professional nanny service in our city, the sheer audacity of it all. It felt like a punch to the gut. I stood up from my desk and walked to the office bathroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stared at my pale, shocked face in the mirror. My first instinct was to call her. My fingers trembled as I hit the call button. She answered immediately, her voice as crisp and cool as if she were answering a business call. "Hello? Daisy? What is this? This Venmo request? This invoice? Is this a joke?" My voice was higher than usual, tight with a mixture of confusion and rising anger. "No, Violet, it's not a joke," she said, and the casual way she said it was what truly terrified me. "I provided a service. You pay for services." "A service? You watched your niece and nephew. We're family. I asked you for a favor, and you said yes. You said, that's what sisters are for." I was practically whispering, conscious of my coworkers just outside the door. "And I did you that favor," she shot back, her voice hardening. "But my time isn't free. Do you think I have nothing better to do than watch your kids? I have my own life, my own bills. You and Tom have your big important careers. You make good money. It's only fair that you compensate me for my professional time." "Professional time? $100 an hour? Daisy, that's insane. Who told you that was a reasonable rate?" "It's the going rate for premium, one-on-one childcare. I consider myself premium. Besides, it's a preferred family rate. I could have charged more." I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't my sister. This was a stranger. A cold, calculating stranger wearing my sister's voice. "We never, ever talked about money," I said, my voice shaking with rage and hurt. "Not once. I offered to take you to dinner. I offered you a spa day. You said, 'Don't be silly.' If you had said you needed to be paid, we could have talked about it. We would have found someone else." "Oh, so my help is only wanted when it's free?" she sneered. Typical. "Look, I don't have time to argue about this. I watched your kids for 12 hours. You owe me $1,200. Pay the invoice, Violet. It's that simple." "No," I said, the word tasting like metal in my mouth. "No, I'm not paying you $1,200 for something you offered to do as a favor. That's extortion." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was low and menacing. "If you don't pay me, I'll find another way to get what I'm owed." "You don't want to find out what that is?" She hung up. I stood in the silence of the bathroom, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. The reflection in the mirror was a stranger, a woman whose sister had just tried to scam her. The hurt was a physical thing, a heavy, cold stone in my chest. But underneath the hurt, something else was beginning to harden. Resolve. She had picked the wrong person to bully. She had mistaken my kindness for weakness. And I would not pay. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Daisy went on a full-scale offensive. She blocked me on all social media, but not before posting a series of vague, passive-aggressive memes about selfish family members and knowing your worth. She told our parents a wildly fabricated version of the story in which I, the wealthy, callous sister, had hired her for a job and was now refusing to pay her wages. My parents, bless their conflict-avoidant hearts, tried to mediate. "Violet, honey, maybe you could just pay her something?" my mom suggested over the phone. "You know how she is with money. It's probably not about the money itself. She's just feeling unappreciated." "Mom, she sent me a bill for $1,200 and threatened me," I said, my voice tight. "This is not about feeling unappreciated. This is about greed." The standoff continued. I refused to engage. I refused to pay. I mourned the loss of my sister in private, grieving the person I thought she was. I assumed naively that eventually she would run out of steam and the whole ugly affair would just fade away. I was wrong. About a month after the initial invoice, I came home from work to find a certified letter in the mailbox. It was from the county courthouse. My hands were numb as I tore it open. Inside was a summons to appear in small claims court. The plaintiff was Daisy Miller, and the defendant was me. The amount of the claim was for $1,200, and the cause was a breach of verbal contract. I sank onto the kitchen stool, the paper rattling in my hand. She had actually done it. She was taking her own sister to court over a lie. The shock was quickly replaced by a cold, clear fury. The kind of anger that doesn't scream, but plans. "She sued us," I said to Tom when he walked in the door, holding up the summons. He read it, his face darkening with every word. He looked at me, and I saw the same steely resolve in his eyes that I felt in my own heart. "Okay," he said, his voice low. "Okay, then we fight." And that's when I stopped being a grieving sister and became a defendant preparing her case. The hurt was still there, a dull ache behind my ribs, but it was now fuel. Daisy wanted to play games? Fine, I would play to win. My dining room table became my command center. I wasn't going to walk into that courtroom with just my side of the story. I was going to walk in with a mountain of irrefutable black and white proof. I was going to dismantle her lie piece by piece. First, I went to the daycare. I explained the situation to the director, who looked at me with a mixture of pity and disbelief. She printed out the sign-in and sign-out sheets for those 3 days. This was Exhibit A. It proved she never picked the children up at 2 p.m. as her invoice claimed. The sheets clearly showed Daisy had signed them out at 2:47 p.m. on Monday, 2:45 p.m. on Wednesday, and 2:51 p.m. on Friday. It was a small discrepancy, but it was a start. It was the first thread I could pull to unravel her story. Next, I logged into my Venmo and bank accounts and spent an entire evening printing out 2 years of our transaction history. This was Exhibit B, the history of our relationship, and it painted a crystal clear picture. It was filled with dozens of small, informal exchanges that were obviously not business transactions. There was $25 sent to her for her birthday, $50 to thank her for watching her dog Apollo, and $15 from her to pay me back for lunch. It was a history of gifts and friendly reimbursements, not the history of an employer and an employee. Then, I printed the text messages, the entire conversation, my initial frantic ask, my clear, unambiguous offer of a non-monetary thank you, the dinner, the spa voucher, and her enthusiastic, cheerful agreement with not a single mention of payment. "Don't be silly, we're family." This was Exhibit C, the so-called contract. But I knew I needed a smoking gun, something she couldn't argue with or dismiss as a misunderstanding. And then I remembered the cameras. We have a video doorbell and a small security camera in our living room, pointed at the main entrance. I poured a large cup of coffee and sat down at my computer, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I opened the security app and navigated to the dates in question. It was tedious work, scrubbing through hours of footage, but my determination was absolute. And then, I found it. On Monday, where she had claimed 4 hours of work, the camera log showed her car arriving at 3:01 p.m. and leaving at 5:32 p.m., a total of just 2 hours and 31 minutes. The discrepancy on Wednesday was even more glaring. Her invoice again claimed 4 hours, but the camera showed her arriving at 3:17 p.m. and leaving at 5:08 p.m., which was barely an hour and 48 minutes. And for Friday, the log showed her arriving at 2:58 p.m. and leaving at 6:05 p.m., which was closer to 3 hours, but it also revealed she hadn't been alone. Her ex-boyfriend Gatsby had been with her. I felt a jolt of adrenaline. This was it. This was everything. She hadn't just inflated her rate. She had blatantly lied about the hours. She had billed me for more than double the time she was actually in my house. And on Friday, she'd had company. I took screenshots of the camera logs, time-stamped and clear as day. I printed them in high-resolution color. I compiled everything into a thick, organized binder. with tabbed sections for each piece of evidence. The daycare sheets, the Venmo history, the text messages, and the grand finale, the camera logs. As I closed the binder, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The grief for my sister was still there, but it was overshadowed by a cold, hard certainty. She had built a house of lies, and I had the evidence to tear it down, brick by brick. Let her bring on the courtroom. I was ready. Small claims court is not like what you see on television. There's no polished wood, no dramatic jury box, no lawyer shouting objection. It's a small beige room with fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look slightly ill. The air smells faintly of stale coffee and desperation. The judge isn't even a judge. He's a commissioner, a man in a rumpled suit with a weary expression that suggested he'd already heard every possible excuse and sob story the world had to offer. I sat on one side of the room, Tom beside me for moral support, my evidence binder resting heavily on my lap. Daisy sat on the other side. She was dressed for a job interview in a crisp blazer, her hair perfectly styled. She shot me a look of pure, unadulterated confidence, a smirk playing on her lips. She genuinely believed she was going to win. The thought was so absurd it was almost funny. She looked at me as if I were the one who had betrayed her. When our case was called Miller versus Miller, the commissioner sighed, as if the shared last name was already giving him a headache. He gestured for Daisy to begin. She stood up and gave the performance of a lifetime. Her voice was steady and clear, dripping with faux sincerity. She painted a picture of herself as the long-suffering, helpful sister, always at the beck and call of her wealthy, demanding younger sibling. Your Honor, she began, my sister Violet and I had a verbal agreement. She was in a bind and needed a professional childcare provider on short notice. I'm experienced in childcare, and I agreed to provide my services. We agreed on a fair price for my time and labor. My jaw nearly hit the floor. A lie. A complete, bald-faced lie, delivered without a flicker of hesitation. She leverages our family connection to get free labor, Daisy continued, her voice taking on a wounded tone. She and her husband are very successful. They can certainly afford to pay for the services they use. I worked for 12 hours, providing expert care for her 2 young children. All I am asking is to be paid for the work I did, as per our verbal contract. She claimed the standard rate for her services was $125 an hour, but she had given me a, quote, generous family discount of $100 an hour. She presented her ridiculous clip art adorned invoice as if it were a legally binding document. The commissioner looked at her, then at me, his expression unreadable. Ms. Miller, he said to me, your response? I took a deep breath, stood up, and walked to the plaintiff's table. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. Your Honor, my sister is not telling the truth. There was no verbal contract. There was no discussion of payment whatsoever. I asked my sister for a family favor, and she agreed. I have evidence to support my testimony. I placed the binder on the table and opened it. First, I said, my voice clear and even. This is a printout of our entire text message conversation leading up to the days in question. As you can see, I offer to thank her with dinner or a spa voucher. Her response is, and I quote, don't be silly. We're family! The commissioner took the pages and read them, his eyes scanning the text. He didn't say anything. Second, I continued, this is a 2-year history of financial transactions between my sister and me. It shows a pattern of small gifts and reimbursements, the kind of informal exchanges typical between close family members, not an employer and an employee. He took those pages as well. I saw Daisy shift in her seat, her smirk faltering slightly. Third, this is the official sign-out sheet from my children's daycare. It shows my sister picked them up close to 2:45 p.m. each day, not 2 p.m. as her invoice claims. He glanced at the sheet, then at Daisy's invoice. A flicker of something. Interest? Annoyance? Crossed his face. And finally, Your Honor, I said, my voice dropping slightly as I played my trump card, this is the time-stamped log from my home security cameras for all 3 days. I handed him the final set of pages. This time, he didn't just glance, he stopped. He put on a pair of reading glasses that had been hanging around his neck. He leaned forward, studying the pages intently. The room was silent except for the hum of the overhead lights. He looked at the log for Wednesday. He looked at Daisy's invoice. He looked back at the log. He took off his glasses and looked directly at my sister. Ms. Miller, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, your invoice here states that on Wednesday you provided 4 hours of care, from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. That's correct, Your Honor, Daisy said, her voice a little too bright. Well, this security log, which shows your car arriving and leaving the premises, indicates you arrived at your sister's home at 3:17 p.m. and left at 5:08 p.m. He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. That is less than 2 hours. Can you explain this 2-hour discrepancy? The moment was everything I had hoped it would be. The color drained from Daisy's face. Her confident smile didn't just crack. It shattered into a million pieces. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. Well, Your Honor, she stammered, her eyes darting around the room, as if searching for an escape route. The camera? It must be faulty. Or maybe I was there earlier. I was just sitting in my car, preparing for the job. The commissioner stared at her, his eyebrow raised so high it nearly disappeared into his hairline. The excuse was so flimsy, so pathetic, it was an insult to his intelligence. He didn't need to hear another word. He flipped through the other camera logs, his expression growing more and more grim. He saw the discrepancy for Monday. He saw the log for Friday, showing Gatsby's arrival. He closed the binder with a soft thud that echoed in the silent room. He looked at Daisy, and his voice was cold steel. Ms. Miller, you have presented an invoice that appears to be fraudulent. You have claimed hours you do not work. You have testified that there was a verbal contract for payment when the evidence strongly suggests otherwise. This court does not take kindly to being lied to. He turned his gaze to the court clerk. Claim dismissed with prejudice. He banged his gavel once. Next case. It was over. Just like that. Daisy stood frozen for a moment, her face a mask of disbelief and humiliation. She shot me a look of pure hatred, a look that severed the last frayed thread of our sisterhood. Then she turned and practically fled from the courtroom. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Tom squeezed my hand. We had won, but it didn't feel like a victory, it felt like a funeral. Walking out of the courthouse and into the bright afternoon sun felt like surfacing after being held under water. I was relieved, exhausted, and profoundly sad. The adrenaline that had been coursing through me for weeks drained away, leaving behind a hollow ache. I had proven I was right, but I had lost my sister in the process. We stood on the courthouse steps, blinking in the light, not sure what to do next. That's when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a text from my mom, who was anxiously awaiting the outcome. But the name on the screen made my blood run cold. It was Gatsby. I hadn't spoken to Daisy's on-again, off-again ex-boyfriend in months, not since their latest dramatic breakup. My finger hovered over the screen. Why on earth was he texting me now? Curiosity won out over caution. I opened the message. Hey Violet, heard through the grapevine what Daisy did. It's insane. I just wanted you to know. I was with her on 2 of those afternoons she watched your kids. She spent most of the time on the phone with her lawyer friend, workshopping this whole verbal contract idea. She told me she was going to squeeze you for every penny she could. Said you guys owed her. I have the text from her about it. If you need them, let me know. So sorry you had to go through that. I read the message once, then twice. I handed the phone to Tom, unable to speak. He read it and a low whistle escaped his lips. Wow, he breathed. Just wow. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This hadn't been a desperate, spur-of-the-moment cash grab born from financial hardship. This wasn't a simple case of my sister feeling taken for granted. This was a calculated, premeditated plan. A conspiracy. She had used the time she was supposed to be watching my children to plot her extortion, with her ex-boyfriend as her sounding board. He was the witness she had forgotten about. The evidence from Gatsby wasn't necessary for the court case, which was already over, but it was necessary for me. It was the final, brutal confirmation that I had done the right thing. It erased any lingering doubt, any shred of guilt I might have felt about the chasm that had opened between us. This wasn't a relationship that had fractured under stress. It was a relationship that had been poisoned from the inside out by my own sister's greed and malice. The fallout with our family was immediate and messy. As I had predicted, my parents called, urging reconciliation. She's your sister, Violet, my dad said, his voice heavy with disappointment. You have to find a way to forgive her. Family is the most important thing. Did she forgive me when she was planning to defraud me? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Did she act like family when she lied under oath in a courtroom? She's just struggling, my mom pleaded. She made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk, Mom, I said, my patience gone. A mistake is not a month-long calculated plot to sue your own family based on lies. I'm done. They didn't understand. They couldn't, or perhaps wouldn't, accept the depth of her betrayal. So, with a heavy heart, I screenshotted Gatsby's text message and sent it to them in a group chat. I simply wrote, "This is why I'm done. Please respect my decision." The silence from them was deafening. There were no more calls to make peace. They finally understood. It's been 6 months now. I have not spoken to Daisy, and I have no plans to. The term for it online is no contact, and it has brought a surprising amount of peace to my life. Sometimes I feel a phantom limb-like ache where my sister used to be. I see something in a store I know she would love, or I hear a song that reminds me of us singing in the car as teenagers, and the grief hits me all over again. But then I remember the coldness in her voice, the smug look on her face in that courtroom, and the chilling words in Gatsby's text, and I know I made the right choice. I protected my family, my real family, Tom, and my children from her toxicity. I learned a painful lesson. Some relationships, even ones forged in the bonds of blood and childhood, have an expiration date. Greed is a powerful acid. It can dissolve even the strongest ties. I didn't lose my sister in that courtroom. I realized I had lost her long before that. The invoice wasn't the cause of death for our relationship. It was just the official time of death on the certificate. And in the quiet that she left behind, I found a strength I never knew I had.